Bednarek trying to get into the mix here. Here comes McCollum and Bednarek at the line. And
did you see it coming? A race that felt like a chess match in spikes. The new blood, Jamaica's speed demons, Akeem Blake and Oblique Seville. Strong starts, loud promises. Then Kenny Bednarek standing in their path, calm but lethal. What if I told you this was more than a race, more than medals? This could be the pivot that changes who writes history. Number 1, rise of Akeem Blake and Oblique Seville. When you talk about Jamaican sprinting, the shadow of Usain Bolt looms so large it almost feels like no one else can step into the light.
Turn it on, Charleston with the United States strong as well, but look at that finish from Akeem Blake.
But here's the twist. 2 names have been creeping up, quietly turning whispers into roars. Akeem Blake and Oblique Seville. These aren't just up-and-comers. These are young sprinters who've already cracked that sacred sub-10 barrier, the one line in the sand that separates the hopefuls from the actual threats. Blake, the calm assassin with a poker face, has been stacking races with the kind of consistency that gets coaches leaning forward and rivals sweating just a little more in the call room. Winning the 2024 Diamond League 100-meter wasn't just another medal. It was a statement. Jamaica's new guard is ready, and Blake is wearing the crown whether anyone likes it or not. Then there's Oblique Seville.
this brilliant rid. He even has time to salute. 985.
Smooth, fearless, and unshaken by the lights of the Diamond League. In Lausanne, he didn't just show up. He dropped a 9.87 on the clock and beat names like Noah Lyles. Think about that for a second. This is a man who stared down the reigning king of American sprinting and said, "Yeah, not today." That kind of win echoes louder than the stadium cheers. It sends chills because it hints at something bigger.
So for me, it's to just keep my focus at all time and do not pay attention to what's going on in the crowd or whatsoever.
Maybe Jamaica's long drought in men's 100-meter global gold is about to end. Seville himself has said it out loud. He believes he's the one to do it. Confidence? Sure. But this is sprinting. Sometimes belief is the fuel that burns fastest. And here's where the tension spikes. The Jamaican crowd is buzzing again, the same way they did when Bolt used to crouch in the blocks.
There's no it's going to be Noah. You want to stare me down, that's fine, but I ran 5 rounds, he's fresh.
You can feel the hunger. Fans desperate for the next great champion, a sprinter to keep Jamaica's name stamped on the history books. Seville and Blake are stepping into that expectation, side by side, and maybe even against each other. A friendly rivalry? For now, but we know how rivalries in track evolve. Sometimes iron sharpens iron, sometimes iron breaks under pressure. But here's the catch. You'd think this story is about Jamaica reclaiming its throne. And maybe it is. But across the line, in the same races, another figure has been quietly sharpening his blade, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And when he did, it wasn't just about winning. It was about shattering the script everyone thought they knew. Because sometimes when the crowd's cheering for one flag, it's the other flag that crosses the line first. Number 2, Kenny Bednarek's shifting narrative and national title. For years, Kenny Bednarek was cast as the side character in track's biggest show. The guy who finished second. The man always right there, fast enough to make the podium, never quite allowed to snatch the spotlight. It's almost cruel when you think about it. Imagine being one of the fastest men alive, but your entire storyline gets reduced to, yeah, he's consistent, in silver. If track had a meme page, Bednarek would have been the face of always the bridesmaid, never the bride. But here's where things get interesting. This year, Kenny ripped that label off his chest and stomped on it. He claimed the USA 100-meter national title, a first for him. It wasn't just another win, it was a public rebuke to every critic, every fan who doubted his killer instinct. Suddenly, the narrative changed from runner-up to man to beat. And make no mistake, this wasn't a fluke. It was years of sharpening, rebuilding, and carrying the chip on his shoulder like extra fuel. But what really turned heads wasn't just the win. It was the drama that came with it. In the 200-meter final at the U.S. Championships, Bednarek and Noah Lyles clashed, not just in times, but in tempers. A shove, a stare. words exchanged that didn't sound like congratulatory compliments. Suddenly, the cameras weren't just tracking finish line splits. They were glued to two men who clearly had unfinished business. And Bednarek wasn't backing down. He called Lyles' behavior unsportsmanlike and doubled down, saying he's here for respect. That moment, heated, raw, might have been the spark he needed all along. And think about it. How many athletes get defined not by their wins, but by what they're missing? Bednarek was tired of being remembered for silver. He said enough is enough. And when you strip away the polite interviews and the polished sponsor talk, what you're left with is a man who looks like he's finally embracing the role of villain, or hero, depending on whose flag you wave. The emotional roller coaster here is wild. Fans who once wrote him off are suddenly taking him seriously. Opponents who used to circle him as manageable now have to adjust their game plans. And deep down, Bednarek knows the most dangerous weapon isn't his top speed. It's the fact that no one expects the narrative to flip this hard, this fast. But here's the question you can't shake. Was this national title the climax of his story? Or just the first act? Because the real test is coming. Not against Lyles this time, but against the very sprinters Jamaica is placing its hopes on. And what happens when Bednarek's fight for respect collides head-on with Blake and Seville's hunger for legacy? That's when sprinting stops being just a race and becomes a battle for who gets to write history. Number 3, behind-the-scenes drama, Bednarek versus Lyles. Track rivalries are usually clean. Shake hands, smile for the cameras, maybe a little banter before the race. But sometimes that thin layer of sportsmanship cracks, and what leaks through is raw, unfiltered tension. That's exactly what happened when Kenny Bednarek and Noah Lyles collided, not just in speed, but in pride. Picture this, U.S. Championships 200-meter final. The crowd's buzzing, the stakes couldn't be higher. Lyles takes the win, but instead of the usual fist bump or good race, bro, there's a moment, a look, a shove. Suddenly, two of America's fastest men weren't racing anymore. They were posturing. Bednarek didn't let it slide. He went public, calling the behavior unsportsmanlike. And the fans? Oh, they smelled blood in the water. This wasn't just about who crossed the line first anymore. It was about respect. And in a sport where milliseconds decide everything, respect can feel heavier than a gold medal. Bednarek has always been quiet, the grinder in the background. Lyles, the showman, the headline machine. Put those two personalities in the same lane, and sparks are inevitable. Some people compared it to a superhero face-off. Lyles, the flashy lead, Bednarek, the rival, finally stepping into his power. Only difference? No capes. Just spikes, sweat, and a lot of ego. But here's the emotional twist. You could argue this was the best thing to happen to Bednarek. For years, people saw him as reliable, maybe even predictable. Now, he's unpredictable. Fans are tuning in not just for his races, but for what might happen after them. Every stare down, every word, every body language cue feels loaded. Did Bednarek let that moment fuel him or consume him? And here's where the mystery deepens. If Bednarek can handle Lyles, the reigning king of American sprinting, what does that mean when he lines up against Jamaica's rising stars? Because Blake and Seville don't play nice either. Their starts are explosive. Their confidence is sky high, and their entire nation is behind them. So ask yourself, was the Bednarek versus Lyles' scuffle just a one-time flare-up, or the moment Bednarek finally broke free from the always second storyline? Because if he carries that fire into the international stage, then the real question isn't whether Blake or Seville can outrun him. It's whether they can withstand a man who's no longer satisfied with silver and has the drama, the hunger, and the timing to prove it. And here's the kicker. The world's about to find out. Number 4, race dynamics. How Bednarek beat Blake and Seville. Every sprint starts the same way. 8 men crouched low, listening for the gun. But what unfolds over the next 10 seconds is never the same. It's chaos disguised as precision. And in this particular showdown, Kenny Bednarek faced off against Jamaica's 2 brightest hopes, Akeem Blake and Oblique Seville. On paper, the odds tilted toward Jamaica. Both Blake and Seville are known for their explosive starts, the kind of lightning reactions that make the first 30 meters feel like a knockout punch. And true to form, when the gun fired, they did exactly that. Blake blasted out, smooth and efficient, while Seville surged with that signature drive phase that's made analysts whisper he might be the one to bring global 100 million gold back to Jamaica. For a split second, it looked like the script was writing itself. Jamaica in the lead, the crowd roaring, history lining up to repeat. But here's where Bednarek flipped the narrative. Unlike Blake and Seville, his strength isn't always in the opening burst. It's in the grind, the top-end speed, the moment when the adrenaline fades and the lactic acid starts clawing at your legs. Around the halfway mark, something shifted. Bednarek's stride opened, his body stayed relaxed, and you could almost see him thinking, "You had your fun. Now it's my turn." By 50 meters, the gap started closing. By 70, Blake's early spark dimmed just enough for Bednarek to pull level. And then came the part that separates good sprinters from great ones: composure. While Seville tightened up, fighting to hold position, Bednarek's face looked calm, like he was jogging through Sunday practice. That's when the crowd knew. The American wasn't just chasing anymore, he was taking control. The finish told the story in bold print. Bednarek across the line first, Jamaica's stars a step behind. And here's the twist. It wasn't even his perfect race. Observers noticed his first steps were still a little shaky, not the crisp launch of a specialist. Which means this victory wasn't luck. It was resilience, timing, and the kind of closing speed that makes you wonder what happens when he finally nails the start. And that's the part that should send a chill through his rivals. Because if Bednarek can beat Jamaica's new golden hopes on a less than perfect day, what happens when everything clicks? The answer may be coming sooner than anyone's ready for. Number 5, insider perspectives and rumors. On the track, it's all stopwatch and finish lines. But off the track, that's where the whispers live. And in sprinting, whispers can be louder than a starting gun. Ask anyone in the inner circle of track and field, and they'll tell you, Kenny Bednarek's story this season isn't just about what he's doing physically. It's about what's been happening behind the curtain. For one, his training has taken on a sharper edge. People close to his camp say Bednarek has been drilling not just speed, but mental toughness. Think of it like upgrading the software as much as the hardware. You can have the fastest legs in the world, but if your head is cluttered, that gold medal might as well be locked behind glass. Bednarek seems to know this. He's been leaning into focus, visualization, and the kind of mental armor you need when everyone is waiting to see you trip up. And then there are the rumors. Some claim Bednarek has been dealing with nagging cramps in early rounds of competition, something that would have rattled a less experienced athlete. Instead, he adjusted, stayed patient, and didn't let the setbacks derail him. That's the kind of resilience you don't see on a stat sheet, but it might be the very thing keeping him alive in these stacked races. Meanwhile, Oblique Seville isn't exactly sitting quiet. He's been bold, publicly declaring he can end Jamaica's drought in the men's 100 meters. That's a heavy claim, and it's made with the kind of confidence that borders on prophecy. Fans love it, analysts debate it, and competitors? Well, let's just say they circle his name a little tighter in the heat sheets. Because when someone believes that deeply, it's dangerous, even if they're not the fastest on paper that day. Now layer in the rivalry with Noah Lyles. Some say the shove, the stare down, the unsportsmanlike tension. That was more than just drama, that was gasoline. Bednarek isn't just running against the clock anymore. He's running against the narrative, against the doubts, against the idea that he's the guy who always settles for second. And sometimes spite is the best pre-workout. But here's the hook. Are we focusing too much on the visible drama and missing what's really happening? Is Bednarek's sudden surge a product of beef and motivation? Or has his training quietly hit a new level that no one's fully caught onto yet? Because if it's the latter, if this is just the beginning, then the showdown coming next might not just shake up the Jamaican rivalry. It might upend the entire sprinting hierarchy. And that's where things get even scarier. Number 6, what it all implies for the global stage. Every race tells a story, but not every story has the same weight. What Bednarek did against Akeem Blake and Oblique Seville wasn't just about crossing the finish line first. It was about shifting momentum, about changing the balance of power right before the world stage lights up. Because now we're not talking about practice meets or regional bragging rights. We're talking about the World Championships, where one race can immortalize you or bury you. Here's the setup. Jamaica hasn't seen a men's 100-meter global gold since the Bolt era ended. That's not just a statistic, it's a wound. Fans want it healed, athletes feel the pressure, and Seville has boldly stepped up to say he's the one who can deliver. Blake, too, has the results to back up his threat. Their country doesn't just want a medal, they expect it. And expectations, as every athlete knows, can weigh heavier than ankle weights. Now enter Bednarek. Fresh off his US title, fueled by drama with Lyles, and carrying the swagger of someone who's finally shaken off the always second curse. He's not just another contender anymore. He's the American roadblock standing in Jamaica's path to redemption. And that's where things get tense. Because this isn't just USA versus Jamaica. It's narrative versus narrative, hunger versus hunger. Think of it like a movie script. On one side, a nation desperate to reclaim its glory. On the other, a runner who's been doubted, dismissed, and shoved, literally and figuratively, who's now rising when it matters most. That collision isn't just sport, that's theater. That's history begging to be written in real time. And here's where the mystery box stays wide open. What happens if Seville actually does it? If Jamaica finally ends its drought, the island becomes electric again, a new legend born. But what happens if Bednarek holds them off? If the villain in Jamaica's story becomes the hero in America's? Does that flip the sprinting landscape for the next decade? One thing's certain, the stakes are higher than ever. This isn't just about medals or prize money, it's about identity, pride, and who gets remembered when the cameras fade. Someone will rise, someone will fall, and in 10 seconds or less, we'll all witness whose story the world chooses to tell. But here's the wildest part. This race, this drama, it might not even be the final chapter. Because the way things are going, the sprinting world could be on the verge of a rivalry that stretches far beyond just one season. And that means the best, or maybe the messiest, is still to come. Here's the twist. Sometimes the greatest victories aren't just those you cross the line winning. It's the ones where you beat your doubt. Bednarek, after so many seconds, just stole first. Seville is daring to believe Jamaica can rise again. Blake is sharpening what it takes to challenge. But in sprints, certainty is a fragile thing. What matters most is who shows up in Tokyo, with heart, grit, speed, and maybe a signature moment. Who do you think will steal the crown? Drop it in the comments and brace yourself, the story's just beginning.